welcome to Wealth Edit Wednesday, everyone. We have Emily Jane Johnston here. We got to know her. She runs a blog called Fashion Foie Gras, but you're recently rebranding to Emily Jane Johnston. Do I have that right?
Yes, you do.
So she and I, or both of us, Emily and I, share a love for the Low Country and all things British. And so she just has such a wonderful way of styling herself and others. And then also why we really wanted her to come on for our members today is that she's done such a great job building a brand on the internet through social media. And I think for some of us, social scares us, or we say like, oh, we're not good at it. It's the same thing I hear about women talking about money is the same thing I hear about their social media presence. Like, that's not for me, but it is, because that's just the world that we live in. And so how do we become comfortable with that if we aren't necessarily drawn to it? So just welcome. And we always start out Wealth Edit Wednesdays with you just sharing your story. So maybe just tell us who you are, where you're from, what you've been doing.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. I'm so excited to be here. I'm coming at you from London. I'm currently in a hotel room because I'm headed to Los Angeles on Monday. So I'm sort of camping in the city at the moment.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure if you can tell from the accent, it seems a little questionable these days, but I am actually Southern. So my hometown is Beaufort, but I've lived in London for 20 years now. So my accent's a little confused, but I basically came over here 20 years ago to work on a student visa and ended up getting really lucky, worked for an auction house, long story short, moved my way up in that. Very proud of the fact that I was the first female and youngest board director on this auction house that's been in London since 1666. So it was a pretty amazing career. And then I got to a point in my career 10 years down the line where I felt like I had more to learn outside of the arena I was currently sitting in. So I jumped into the world of social media. And this was when I first started, it was 12 years ago. So more coming up on 13 these days. So it was a pretty young atmosphere at that time, not just with people, because even then I jumped in when I was 30 and I was pretty old already for that market. And I started a blog and I basically modeled it on Perez Hilton, but I was doing it with fashion. So I was writing between 10 and 20 stories a day, publishing throughout the day. Anytime I would get a press release or a news story would drop, I would run into the bathroom and write it up in my office. And then eventually it just got to be a little too much to handle. I was sleeping about 3 hours a night. And at the age of 31, I decided to up sticks and start a whole new life for myself in social media. So I took a big risk and not really knowing what was going to happen, and obviously not being able to tell the future that the whole world would be completely changed by what would be Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. And at the time, we only had Facebook and Twitter. So Instagram wasn't even a thing yet. And now it just seems like, I should tell you also, I worked in PR for the 10 years that I was at the auction house. So for me, I became absolutely fascinated, and still am today, by the power that social media has when telling a story about a brand or as a PR vehicle for brands around the world. And it is such a magnificent place for so many people. And we've talked about this and about age groups and about women and certain people not really knowing what to do with social media, or maybe thinking it's a young person's game or not for them. And I'm the number one person who will tell you that this is a game for everyone, and there's no faster way to grow your business than with social media. So that is kind of what I love to shout about. People in London joke that I'm the social media hug, because I come in after people have maybe spent a lot of money with an agency or have tried social media for a couple of years and been really frustrated and stopped working with it. And I come in all shiny and like a ray of light, trying to convince them otherwise, that social media is actually worth every amount of effort that you put into it. So yeah, that's the most roundabout way, the quickest story I've ever told about my life.
Yeah, that's great. Well, let's dive into social media, because I think that that's really important. And it's funny because we have been trying to grow an Instagram presence for 2 years. And I remember one of my friends, he's an artist. I said, how did you grow your presence? And she said, one follower at a time. And that is exactly what it feels like. It is such a frustrating thing. I don't know how. I mean, I think some people just like magically take off. There's another woman in our space who has like a gajillion followers. I don't know how she did it. I mean, we're not as sort of like flaming feminist financial person as she is. So maybe we need to be more spicy, but when we're just trying to grow it the normal way, it's tough. I mean, I can see why people lose steam in it and maybe need a social media hug.
Yeah, it is. It's really easy to lose steam, and especially because it is the ultimate comparison trap. So it's very easy to look at people that are in your same sphere and look at them being so successful online. And you sit back and think, what am I doing wrong? Am I not sexy enough with my platform? Is my product not good enough? And I really love that you said building your platform one follower at a time, because I am of such a firm believer in that is so important, one person at a time. And I always tell people, imagine if you had all of your followers as customers one day in your store, for example. I mean, you would be so overwhelmed. Like if over 4,000 people showed up on one of your sites tomorrow, you'd be like, what am I going to do here? So I always say, try and think of it not as like a lump number. Think of them as individual people. And the success should be measured on the fact that those are actual people that are interested in your business. They're no different to the person that walks in the store, because your social media is your storefront. So every time they're walking in, it might be digital, but they're still walking into what you have presented. And I think that's a really important perspective on social media. It's not about having 100,000 followers. It's about having X number and being able to service them so well that they are truly a customer.
Yes, that's a good word. And so what is your tip if people do not want to turn the camera on themselves and talk to the internet?
I don't think you have to. I think it is always a good idea to, if you can. And I will say, first of all, I always encourage, I'm a big storyteller. I think brands are built on stories. I think the more that you are happy to share with that, the more success you will find. That doesn't always mean that you have to turn the camera on yourself, but I do think it helps, because social media was built on the idea of us sharing our lives with other people. And that sort of personality with a brand is so important and can be so beautiful. And I will say that if you think you're not comfortable with it, I will tell you that nobody comes into this thinking they're going to be amazing. And it takes so much practice. And I see people now and they're just so mystified by how I can casually like turn the camera on myself right before I'm about to go to bed and talk to 100,000 people. And it's because I have been doing it for over a decade. I guarantee you the first time I turned that camera on myself, I wish I had it somewhere, because I'm sure it would be this awkward moment of my life. But you work up to it, you get confident, you get comfortable. And you get comfortable because people start reacting to it. And as soon as you put yourself out there, your engagement really does increase, because people feel your vulnerability. And it can be quite a beautiful thing. So my first reaction to that would be, well, why don't you want to be on camera? And maybe try and think about that and do some stuff where you're not publishing it, but you're trying yourself out on camera and sharing it maybe to friends and asking for pointers. And then if you really don't want to make it about you, think about finding someone who can translate that personality, or how can you translate that personality into something that doesn't need to be you on camera. But I do think the biggest mistake that bigger brands make is not giving their social media channels personality.
Yeah. I think everyone's so scared. I mean, we've worked with several, and this is why I think people do lose steam too, is that they know that they need help. And so then you hire help, and the help is very risk averse or very like wants to be. And I do think we're kind of shifting. I'd be interested in your thoughts on this, to like a more, okay, you can wear a sweatshirt on social media rather than like being perfectly curated. I think people want to see that. That's sort of like where we've been as a globe over the last few years. And so I think that brand strategists can be a little bit risk averse sometimes. And that leads people in a direction that maybe isn't helpful.
Yeah, I agree. You know what? I think I have a lot to say about people that are helping on social media these days. Good things.
Please tell us everything.
Good things and bad things. I think first of all, in this landscape, it is impossible to call yourself an expert. So I'm always wary of people that come to my desk saying they're a social media expert. It is virtually impossible. It just is. The landscape changes every 5 minutes, whether it's a new platform, a new algorithm, new ways to use hashtags, new things Instagram's doing, whatever. It is constantly changing. And about 30% of my job right now with just in handling my own channels is trying to keep on top of those changes and how best I can apply myself to be a part of those changes. So I'm an old dog learning new tricks constantly. So I think it's really important to always be wary of someone who comes onto your scene and tells you they know everything that there is to know about social media, because that is a lie.
Yeah.
And I think people are changing a little bit and realizing that's probably not the best way to pitch themselves. But I also really believe that this is one of those opportunities where, because it's changing so quickly and it's so evergreen, that you as a brand just need to open your eyes, or, you know, as a brand, whether that's you're selling something physical or a service or whatever that might be, you just need to be a part of the conversation. So just dipping your toe in and then paying attention, looking around you and seeing what works, what doesn't work, taking some time to study, using the head that's been put on your shoulders. You will find that 9 times out of 10, you really don't need that much help. And a lot of the times you just need that push. You just need somebody who maybe will walk you through the muddy waters in the beginning. And then on the other side of that, you'll realize that probably the best money spent is time for you and just looking around.
Yeah. I mean, the school of hard knocks is a good one. And that's the school we use for social media, because it's like we're dipping our toe into TikTok. That's a totally different thing than Instagram. So when people say to reuse content, I'm like, I don't see how you can, because they're looking, the TikTok audience is looking for something totally different than Instagram. And I think to encourage people too, I was thinking about how, like, an artist's journey, like if you take a Taylor Swift, let's say that she was producing in the 80s, then she would want to be on MTV. And then in the 90s, she would have wanted to be on, you know, Napster or whatever it is. And then in the 2000s, like maybe it's Twitter and then it's Instagram. And so like when people are like, oh, I don't want to be on TikTok, or I don't want to be on this, it's like you kind of want your brand to be where the people are at the time. So like it's not a forever. I don't think a TikTok presence is going to be forever. It'll probably have a 5 to 10 year shelf life, but it all, I don't know. Do you think all of it enhances your brand? What do you think?
I mean, TikTok's a funny one. I'll be real honest about that. My toe is permanently dipped in that water, but the foot hasn't gone all the way in. I can see where it's addictive, and it is one of these social channels where it is very hard to wrap your head around it, because just when you think that you have, somebody turns up and all they do on TikTok is take a microphone and scratch it with their nails, and this person has 4 million followers, and you're like, okay, I don't really understand this. And this is where social media is really interesting, because the sooner you understand that niches are very important, and so there's almost something for everyone, and then you discover that that's something you thought might be for a few people is actually for a few million people. And it's, again, TikTok's really interesting because you're just seeing all kinds of people do things that you never thought would be entertainment, but that is entertainment. And that really is what it is. It's an entertainment channel. And that's why it's a little different than Instagram. It's a little different than Twitter, a little different than blogs. It's like that hit of dopamine that you get from watching a really funny video that lasts for 30 seconds, then you're on to the next thing. But I do find it a really interesting platform. But you do have these, I'm trying to remember what the platform was called that was, it was like the radio platform, the one where everybody was listening to people talk over.
Oh, yeah.
What was that? Because
And
that's gone now.
It popped up. Oh gosh, what was that?
I we met there. It's basically this thing where you could go into a room and it was like a chat room, but literally chatting. So people would be having conversations and you could drop in and be invited to give advice and things like that. But it was more or less a platform where you're listening. So there was no visual involved. And it was one of these things that was very quick. Clubhouse. Yes. Thank you.
Clubhouse.
Thank you.
Thank
oh my
you.
gosh, I should say that. So Clubhouse. And I think everybody that was in the social media spectrum at the time thought, right. I mean, this is an interesting platform, but it's something that's very COVID friendly because we're all at home and you can listen to things and you don't have to worry about anything in your surroundings and you can just be tuned into this. But as soon as people start to get back to their everyday life, we're not going to be able to use this the way we can now. And they were right. And Clubhouse was a flash in the pan. And this is a little bit where the TikTok Instagram thing is interesting, because I believe Instagram thought TikTok was a bit of a flash in the pan.
Yeah.
And TikTok is now the fastest growing social media platform on the earth. And shows no sign of stopping. And all the other social media guys are freaking out because obviously they have clocked into something that the world wants. And I think a lot of people are rushing to this platform because they think that's where they need to be a part of the conversation. And that kind of movement for brands can sometimes be a little scary and a little intimidating to people. And I always say, you can still have the pleasure of picking your platform at the moment. So for me, Instagram is still the place where I thrive, where I'm very much still a still imagery person. I'm trying to get my head around reels and things like that, but I'm also a long form writer. So my blog has always existed over the past decade. And I really think that there is this push that you need to be everywhere, but I think it's much better for you to be doing something well on one platform than to kind of be dipping into all of them. You just need to have that captain. I'm not saying don't do all of them, but be good, really good and confident at least one.
I love that advice because, and there are still, I mean, we have someone that we know who's extremely successful on YouTube. No one even talks about YouTube. It's an extremely successful platform. Obviously, the place everyone wants to be successful is Instagram, and you've done it. And then, so we're all just kind of figuring out where is our place, and then what also monetizes, because Instagram has been proven to monetize in ways, and YouTube too, but in ways that other platforms just haven't been able to figure that out yet.
Yeah, again, I think it depends on what you want to do, because Instagram has launched so many things over the past few years that, for example, if you're a small shop in downtown Beaufort, that are very profitable for you with shopping pages and just being able to get that exposure and talking to people all over the world about launching Southern products or whatever your thing might be. So I think it really depends on what you want out of social media. And that's where you do need to write up a business plan. Just as you would a business, you need a business plan for how you want social to work for you. And that does if you sit down and you actually write out, what do I want to achieve through social media? That piece of paper will guide you pretty much onto what page you need to be, whether that's Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. I think Facebook's kind of gone by the wayside these days, but, or YouTube. YouTube is still hugely important. But as far as video content is concerned, even the YouTubers have now moved on to TikTok to try and capture that moment. So there's just so much movement, and I totally get why it can be 100% intimidating and scary for most people.
So tell us specifically for a minute about blogging. So do you still think that's a good idea for some brands? And if so, like, what would you say? I mean, you got in at such a good time to the blogosphere. I mean, what would you say to someone that's a recent blogger, a new blogger? Like, what are the things that they should be thinking about or integrating into their business plan?
So blogging is still hugely important because Google is still king and SEO is still king, and Google is pointing people in the direction of information. So this really can be so business specific. So depending on what you're writing about, it is still such a powerful tool to have. So I keep coming back to this small business idea in Beaufort, but I'm going to use that as kind of my framework here. But if you are a small business and you're writing about something that is specific to an area, specific to a certain product line, whatever that might be, being able to write about that in long form and have that as a blog post on your site will direct traffic in an organic way to your site, which can then lead people to shop. So you can put shopping links in the blog post. You can talk about things that are well-rounded, someone's lifestyle, how to make an apple pie, how to decorate a table, any of these things. And then they will come onto your site for looking for that information. So they're looking to be educated, but they will also discover your brand because you have given them an education. So it's a very organic way of exposing your brand to the world. And I think it's still hugely important. And so many people are not talking about it anymore because, again, we're getting these really fast hits with social media. So you feel like you've hit it, but you have to remember that exists for 24 hours in most cases.
Yes.
So, and a blog post, I would say a blog post is forever. So it's kind of like a puppy isn't just for Christmas. Like your Instagram post is just for Christmas, but your blog post is forever. And that is evergreen. And it's something you can continue to update and continue to share through social media. So it really is something that sticks around forever.
Yes. And what tell us about, I mean, this is so basic, but like updating a blog post. So let's say you have like the best apple pie recipe, or you find the best fluffy clogs, which you've already found. Like what, and I'm looking for fluffy clogs. And so like so how do you update that? Like then you find a new pair a couple years later. Tell us how that works. Do you
Yeah.
make a
So
new post, or do you tell us what happens?
you don't have to make a whole new post. I do this quite a lot because I'll do like shopping roundups, but I'll also do them with tips and tricks on how to style, how to wear, how to mend. So really good examples. I did one on belts this week, and this idea that women have a really hard time shopping for belts and hard time having concepts on how to wear them and feel comfortable. And so I've already done the hard work there, where I've written all the things, all the tips, the tricks in long form. So I've got about 1,000 words written down on that. I don't need to change. That doesn't change in the course of 3 years. But what does change are the retailers that are available with those belts. So I've got links to retailers that will always exist. And then as things pop up, I keep notes, I update. And then just at the bottom of the blog post, I will republish it, but I will say this was first published on January 10th, 2021. And people do this all the time. And I don't think many people realize that magazines do this a lot.
Really?
Newspapers do this a lot online. So they'll have stories that will be talking about something that can be evergreen. They simply press republish. And then it's brand new, but you don't even need to do something as hard as republish. You can actually just reshare. So that can be something that you wrote 3 years ago. And if you think about it, the idea is right that you're growing your following. So while you're growing your following, depending on how fast that could be, you could have had 1,000 followers, and 3 years later, you have 100,000 followers. So chances are half those people don't even know that you wrote that.
Yeah.
So being able to share this again, and this is where content is king, but it's also evergreen. So you can keep resurfacing things, making it shiny and new, and putting it back up again for people as you grow. And then the people that have been around with you for a while, oftentimes look at, oh God, I love that. I've such a good memory. So it's almost like you've been friends forever and you're sharing this memory from 5 years ago. So there's nothing wrong with resharing stuff. And I constantly see people trying to churn up new.
Yes.
And 9 times out of 10, you don't need to.
I think that is excellent advice. I mean, I think that we make it so much harder than it needs to be. And like that's what I see often. And because I'm not a big blogger, but we're trying to get into it, is okay. I see this like updated on this date, and I'm like, there must be something easier than what I'm thinking there is. So anyway, you've just unlocked that for us. So thank you for that.
It is pretty easy, but I think also there's just so much new information that floods in all the time that you can just do little tweaks here and there that will make things better. But I really think people forget that as you grow, you have a lot of people that have never seen content before. So that's important to keep in check.
Yeah. And I would say that, that TikTok, I know we keep talking about that today, but that's a platform because it's growing so rapidly every day. If you are on there, like you could post one video, and because of their algorithm, like it could go to a different 100,000 people, the same, so you really, there's just all this madness around that. And
there is, yeah.
Okay, so let's switch gears to talk about you, because you are just this wonderful person that we have had the privilege to meet through our mutual love of the Low Country. But just tell us what you've been doing, and just sort of what with the rebrand of your own personal, from Fashion Frog Raw to just tell us everything.
Okay, so basically when I started this in 2009, the world was a very different place, and you could say things, you could say things, well, not even say things, that's the wrong way to enter that. When blogging first came about, we didn't really think anything of it. I think most of us were kind of going, yeah, we have a blog, no big deal. And you named it without really thinking anything, and this is a funny thing to admit, because of course I was in PR and strategy. So for me to say I wasn't thinking about what my name was, I genuinely did not think it would go very far. I thought I had an outlet for talking about fashion, for being a part of the conversation. And that was the important thing to me, was to be a part of the conversation. And very quickly it escalated. So in the first 3 months of writing my blog, I had over 1 million hits. People were very quick to come about. And the luxury brands in London were very excited, because all of a sudden I was a blogger that was luxury, mainly because of my name. And I had quite a controversial strap line at the time, which I thought was being jokey and fun, which was fashion news force fed daily. And I wasn't in the back room eating foie gras or doing anything harmful to geese.
Yes.
But of course, the animal rights activists jumped down my throat from
Oh,
day
yeah.
3. So, and actually, things have just evolved. When I first started the blog, I was anonymous. So I didn't really put my face out there for the first year and a half. I was writing fashion news. There was no need for me to be present there. And I retained an agent 2 years after I started it, and the agent said to me, the world is going the way of the Kardashians. So we need to have your face out there because nobody cares what you're writing. They want to know about you and what you're doing. And it was good advice at the time because honestly, that is where things were going. And my first reaction to that was, I don't want to be a part of it. Thanks, I'm exiting. And then I was persuaded that actually this could be a good thing, mainly because I'm a size 14, 16 US, size 18 UK, and there just were not a lot of girls of my size on the internet at that time. So there was talk about my size, something that actually 60% of American women can identify with. So anyway, to make a long story short, it became about me and my travels and my adventures and going to fashion weeks around the world every season. And because it became about me, having the name Fashion Foie Gras didn't seem right anymore. Yeah. Because it wasn't about fashion news. It was about me. So slowly my handles moved over to Emily Jane Johnston. And then finally my website got redesigned in November, December, and launched last week.
It is so pretty. I'm going to put it on here while we're talking, but how do people, what's the best way for them to engage with you? And then also, I guess while we have you here, I'd love to talk to you about because we are a site that teaches women to be good with money, through your life, your adult life, what would you say are some tips that just as you've been creating a blog or anything, maybe financially that you feel like you've done really well or you would do differently? We'd love to know.
I think probably the best thing I did financially in my whole life was starting the business 3 years before I left my job to pursue it.
Yes.
And I think so many people were very quick to tell me that I should jump ship.
Yes.
And I had not proven that this was something that could make money. I'd proven that I could be popular and that,
yes.
That the high school geek could be cool. and that was great. But in the back of my head, I sort of had this little niggling feeling that was just saying, make sure you can monetize it. And make sure you can monetize it so that you can live. And you're going to need proof. It can't just be something that you get a big paycheck and you say, I've monetized it and now I can go. So for 3 years, I worked to prove to myself that if I left this quite prestigious job that I'd worked very hard to get the top of, that this would be worth it for me. But I also had a few plans in place. So in my head, I'd worked out that I gave myself X number of months to go from leaving to feeling solid. And if I didn't feel solid, I was very lucky that I had a great boss who was like, hey, yes, you can go try this. And then if things don't work out, we love you here, come back. But it really, I think so all too often people go, I'm fed up with my job. I'm going to leave and that's done. And this is my dream and my passion and I'm going to chase it and it's going to work. And my best advice is to prove to yourself it can work first.
Yes.
And whether that's I also saved thinking that maybe if the first year was a flop, I want to be able to pay my rent in London. And I really did prepare for the worst, to be honest. I really did. I had the best intentions, the biggest dreams, but I just prepared to flop, but I was ready for it. Yeah. And that wasn't me being defeatist or anything. It was just thinking, I'm in a big city. I'm 4,500 miles away from everyone I love. And if I'm going to do this, I need to make sure I have a bit of a cushion. So yeah, I would say prepare, then jump. Don't just jump. And also it makes business a hell of a lot easier if you know that you have a bit of a cushion, so you're not sitting there sweating all the small stuff.
Yes. That is good. I mean, cooler heads always prevail. It's the same if you're just even simply investing in the market. I mean, to have a strategy before you do it, rather than just saying oh, I heard GameStop is cool, I'm going to do it. I mean, that's just not a strategy. And it feels like one thing that you did exceptionally well and continue to do is really thinking about what is the next thing? What's it going to take to get there? And if you have the luxury of doing that, then do it that way. It just always works.
Yeah, because
So
obviously it is a luxury thing because, I think also so many people have lost their jobs during the pandemic and they've had to kind of quickly pivot, and that is a completely different circumstance. I'm talking about, yes, if you have this great idea and you have a secure job, let that secure job take you through until that great idea can be something that's bigger, and graft for it, like spend the endless hours, if you have them, working on this. So I'm not kidding when I say that I slept 3 hours a night for 3 years. I did not sleep ever, but I loved it. And that's the other thing, is I was so passionate about what I was doing that it made it super easy, because I just never wanted to sleep. I was too excited. But I also didn't have kids. I didn't, there's so much that was different for me on this path.
Yes. Well, you've done an exceptional job. I put the link to your blog into the chat, and follow Emily on Instagram, because every day I'm like, where did she get this? What is that? I need this too. And I do that with her more than anyone else on the internet. So thank you so much. And then our last question that we ask people is just why you said yes to the Wealth Edit.
Oh my God. Well, I love you guys, but I also just love the idea of women supporting women as far as talking openly about our finances and how we can be better investors, and getting that there's numbers up of women that aren't so scared to invest and really looking after our own pennies.
Yes, I love that. Well, have safe travels, and we can't wait to see you again in the Low Country.
Thanks so much.
All right. Bye.
Bye.